Now, the last part is working with Azure Blob Storage. Programmatically, if you want to work with, you are a developer. So you need to work with that programmatically. So you should know what classes are there that you can work with. So in this module, we will be talking about, or in this section, we will be talking about what classes are there as of which you can use it as a programmer. So we have certain classes that you can work with to communicate with the storage account blob service. So as I told you that we have multiple features are there, like we have a blob, we have tables, we have queues, we have file share. So storage account says that I have given you specific client classes to communicate with me. So there is one class available in SDK called blob service client. Blob service client act as an entry point. It allows you to communicate with the blob service in a storage account. So it allows you to communicate with the blob service. Now, this will tell you that I have some methods that you can use to get container, to create container, to delete container. So I will allow you to submit a request to a particular blob service. Then within that blob service, we can work with containers. So if I need to communicate with container, so I have a blob container client. Blob container client will contain the information about the container that you need to work with. Whenever you need to create a container, you can talk to it. Whenever you want to get a container, talk to the service, right? So you have that option. Similarly, if you want to work with a blob, a file inside a container, so blob client is pointing to a particular file that would you like to work with. So whenever you're getting a file, you can store it in an object of blob client. Whenever you want to upload a file, blob client is used for the same. Similarly, we have other classes also available, append blob client and block blob client. So this is used to store a specific using a file using a specific algorithms, right? As we discussed. Now let's see here. So creating a client object. So first of all, you need to communicate with the storage account. So you will download the storage account SDK, right? And then you have to create a blob service client object. So I have created a method which will return me a blob service client. So when I'm working with a blob service client object, it is asking me to provide a URL, right? And the credentials that I need to work with. So you can see HTTPS account name colons dot blob dot co dot windows dot net. That's the base URL of the blob service. And then I return this client. Now this client knows that I have to work with the blob service. Now this client will help me out to get a container, create a container, delete a container. I can do that. Now manage container properties and metadata by using .NET. So programmatically, once I have the SDK with me, I can do a lot of things. I can connect to the container, get the container, see its property, delete its property, update its property. So I can manage the properties and the metadata which is associated with the container. So at any point of time, if you are going into a container, so you can see that every container has its properties and metadata. So I selected this container and here I have a container property. So container properties, I cannot change it. It is like E tag, version number, last modified date, lease tag, lease durable, right? Duration. So these are the properties that will give me some information about the container. As well as I have the metadata, extra data about data, key value pair. So I can edit the metadata. So I can add some extra metadata like for which client I'm creating it. Client is Microsoft. So I did that. So I can add the same key and value with different clients so that I can search based on that. I can say, get me all containers or all objects where key is client and value is Microsoft. So it will look into it and it will give me the result back. So I can work with this metadata graphically as well as programmatically, right? So we can call set metadata method to set some key value pairs synchronously, or I can do it in a child thread using async method. So that option is there. So this is a URL. I told you using SDK or using a RESTful architecture, because in both the cases, your request is going into the header part. So you can update the header part and then add the key value pair that you want to work with. XMS meta name. So you define the meta name and then the value of it, right? So it is used to set the values. And this is the command that you can use to retrieve the properties and metadata of a container or the particular blob with a RESTful architecture. So you have the option. Either you can use RESTful architecture or you can use SDKs to play with. Now there is a lab for you that you will be doing it as a homework after the course content. Now, just to make a flavor of it, I have created a small example for you. So I would like to show you that. So this example will allow you to create a container programmatically and work with certain files. So you can, first of all, create a project in .NET, maybe Windows-based application, console-based application, or whatever. Then you add some packages. So I use this Azure Storage.blob. That package is installed. And once this package is installed, then my program starts. So what I did is I added the namespace from the package so that I can work with the storage account in Azure. So I using Azure, azure.storage.blob and azure.storage.blob.model because I would like to use the classes. So whatever classes I have discussed will come from this namespace. Let's see that. So as soon my application start, I am calling this my own method asynchronously, open blob account. So here, this is operate blob async. So what I am doing it here, the very first thing is I'm checking the connection string, whether it is blank or not. So I have given the connection string of my storage account, that is training account CW. Then it is checking if it is null, it return that message. Otherwise, I need to connect to the blob storage, right? So what I did, I want to create a container. So I created a container name, a unique container name. Then I created a blob container client object. Now, blob container client object is basically a class which is coming from, you can see that if you just go to the definition of it. So it is coming from azure.storage.blob, right? That we have referred as a namespace at the top. So I created an object of it. It is asking me, okay, you want me to communicate with the blob service, but where? Which is available in that storage account. And then I'm telling that blob client that you need to work with the container that is with the name given here. That is this name. And I'm checking. This client says that, okay, I can connect to the blob service and I will work with that container. Now, what you want me to do next? I'm asking that blob client that go and check if that container exists. It's okay. Otherwise, create it. Create async. So I'm asking it to create that. So it will going to create a container and then it will give me the URL. By default, it will have the private property, right? So I want to change its property to blob. So I'm saying that blob client, which is aware about the container, that hey, you have to set access policy to the blob. That's what I'll show you till now, right? So let's run that. But before that, you can see I have only 3 folders, images. There is no container with quick start. So my motive is to tell you that yes, we can play with that programmatically as well. So I created a container name. I asked my blob client to get a reference of that container. And then I click create container async. So it is waiting for the task to get completed. And then everything is good. It goes to the next line where it will print the URL. Now let me go to the browser and see whether I have that or not. So I refresh it. So I'm having the container, new container, which is created for me. Right, you can see. And access level is private. Now I want to change it to blob. So in my code, I will continue further and I'm setting the access policy of that container to blob. Done. Now let's go back and you will see that if I refresh it, it is blob. Now in that, I don't have any file at present, right? So I can even work with the files. So I just run the code to show you that, yes, we can create a file as well. So here, I just want to show you that I have created a I ask my blob container client to get me the reference of a blob, get blob client with a blob name. So I know this blob name does not exist at present. So what I'll do is I will read the file from my system. This is a source path on my laptop, and I'm reading that file, and then that file I will pass it to the blob so that the content of that file will be uploaded into that blob, which is called sample blob. So, and I'll add a breakpoint here. So let's run that. So it is there. Now you can see if I just go back to my browser, I refresh this. So it is a sample blob. And when I click on it, it has a text into it called hello text, hello world, I think. Let's see. It is just loading. And I click on the edit. So storage blob quick start is the content. That's what I have written into my file. So if I scroll bit up, so you can see this is the content that I'm writing into the source path, this is the file that I am using it as a source, and I'm uploading it into my blob. So I did that. Similarly, when I continue it, I will delete everything. So I'm just deleting everything. Upload successful. Then I'm just showing you how many blobs you have, and then I will delete that. So yes, I have an option to play with. Now you can see if I go here, so press to delete. But before deleting it, it says that you can see that download successfully, right, into that folder. And you have a file that is called sample blob listing. So it give me, I'm reading the blob as well. Now it says that delete everything. I say press enter. Right. So it will going to delete everything from my system. So I'm just waiting for this. Press enter to delete. Okay. Now it is deleting everything, container and whatever files I've created on my local system, everything is deleted. Now, if you go back and you will click on the containers, you will see that container is no longer exist if I refresh it. Taking time. Okay. So it is